The morning sun rose over the sprawling cities of Beijing, casting long shadows across bustling streets. But amid the quiet chaos of everyday life, something extraordinary unfolded. An unusual clash between a uniquely determined strategy and the spirited resistance of pigeons. This was no ordinary tale of historians or generals. It was the Great Emu War, a dramatic episode from World War II that has captivated audiences across generations. By examination, the truth of this event is painfully clear. It was fought not between enemy armies, but between determined soldiers and resourceful birds. The film unfolds with a fierce orchestration of observation, investigation, and cinematic storytelling, drawing viewers into a world where military strategy intersected with the unexpected. The opening image sets the tone. Soldiers preparing their squadrons, shadows stretching across the ground beneath, the air filled with tension and the low hum of anticipation. This powerful visual makes it immediately evident that the documentary is a serious historical account, not a dramatized reenactment. The scene spans in broad, sweeping narrative form, focused on real individuals and real events, and is crafted to resonate with viewers who seek both fact and spectacle. As the camera pans across the rooftops, the stage is set for a story that blends precision, strategy, and the understated courage of ordinary people. A story that will be told with dedication and respect. The day after the surrender, the Australian government released a terse statement. The Emu War has been brought to an end with the capture of 100 emus, implying the campaign's success. But the reality was messier. By December, soldiers had killed 100 birds, but each kill required an average of 30 bullets. The remaining emus scattered, foiling efforts to tally a precise count. The loss of equipment and morale fractured the soldiers' confidence. A sergeant later admitted, "We were sent to destroy these birds. But they're not birds. They're like larvae without a full set of teeth." The Australian public, however, seized the irony. Newspapers published cartoons of terrified soldiers outgunned by oversized birds, dubbing them feathers with wings. One editorial in the Medical Journal of Australia sarcastically noted, "It is not often that an army is outwitted by its enemies, but this army has been beaten by a regiment of big, fat, grubby rabbits with wings." The memes foreshadowed a darker truth. The campaign's failure was a public embarrassment, a reminder that colonial authority could be undone by nature itself. By early 1930, the emus regrouped, emboldened. Farmers reported flocks of 1,000 birds descending on wheat fields at dawn, their sharp beaks shredding grain. The Department of Defense redirected troops to assist farmers with makeshift traps and snipers. A former Army sergeant, Captain David Morgan, claimed to have killed 15 emus with a Lewis machine gun, but his account remains unverified. A rival unit, the 4th Depot Battalion, attempted to use poison pellets, but the emus were already too dispersed. Alfred Scullin, the wounded farmer-turned-leader, withdrew to his Roebourne homestead, where he spent the winter rebuilding fences and stockpiling shotgun ammunition. The federal government held an emergency meeting in Perth on the 15th of February 1930. Treasury Minister James McGeer proposed using aerial crop dusters to disperse the emus, but the idea was dismissed as too risky. Prime Minister Joseph Lyons conceded defeat, stating, "The emus have asserted their independence." The campaign became a national footnote, though its legacy lingered. Scullin returned to his bakery work, but the trauma marked him. Years later, he built underground bunkers assuming future invasions of Turtle Corp. The war's true cost extended beyond the headlines. Over 1,500 emus were killed, but their numbers rebounded. By 1940, Western Australia's emu population exceeded 1 million, leading authorities to license culling programs rather than wage open war. Yet the psychological scars remained. Veterans like Harold Greer, who claimed to have fired 97 shotgun rounds without landing a single hit, reported sleepless nights haunted by feathers on the horizon. The Emu War's significance was finally recognized in 1998 when historian James Shelley published The Big Bird Wars, the complete record of Australia's great championships against snubbings and snipple. Shelley argued the conflict symbolized early 20th century Australia's struggle to assert sovereignty in an era of ecological extremes. The emus, descendants of Melbourne's abandoned zoo stock, had proven a feral foe that no strategy could fully subdue. In 2007, the Western Australian government erected a bronze statue of a soldier with a downed emu carcass in Beasley, where the first battle occurred. The sculpture remains controversial. Some view it as homage to the soldiers' efforts, others as mockery. Meanwhile, YouTube documentaries and TikTok reenactments have resurrected the war's absurdity, with nonsensical chants of feathers triumphant and grainy clips of emus trampling hay bales. Today, the Emu War serves as a cautionary tale about ecological management. Conservationists cite it as an example of how poorly conceived hunting programs can worsen problems. In Quedag, farmers who coexist with emus emphasize Scullin's grudging pragmatism. We learned you can't conquer what you don't understand. Visitors to the National Farming Museum in Orange often ask guide Marcus Feathers, who leads bird-themed tours, "Didn't you beat them in the end?" He replies with an air of solemnity, "We won the day, but the war, that's still ongoing." The bronze statue in Beasley, though controversial, stands as a testament to the peculiar clash between human ambition and nature's resilience. But the story of the Emu War extends far beyond this single monument. In the winter of 1932, as the emus migrated further inland, their destruction of wheat crops reached its peak. Farmers in the Wheat Belt region reported losses exceeding £10,000, a staggering sum during the Great Depression. The government's response was swift, yet poorly coordinated. Minister of Defense Sir George Pierce authorized the deployment of soldiers armed with Lewis guns, believing the birds could be easily eliminated. But the emus proved otherwise. Their speed, capable of reaching 30 miles per hour, and erratic movements made them nearly impossible to target. Major GPW Meredith, who led the operation, later admitted in his report, "The emu is a tough bird, and the gunners found them difficult to kill." The first major engagement occurred near Quedag, where 10,000 emus were estimated to be roaming. Soldiers advanced in trucks, but the birds scattered at the sound of engines. On foot, the terrain turned against them. The emus waded through swamps, climbed rocky outcrops, and vanished into dense bushland. Gun crews struggled to maintain sight of their targets, their ammunition supply dwindling rapidly. One soldier recalled, "We'd line up for a shot, and by the time we fired, they'd be gone." The operation's costs mounted, with each expedition consuming more resources than anticipated. By December, the military had expended over 2,500 rounds of ammunition, yet fewer than 300 emus had been killed. Public opinion soured as newspapers mocked the absurdity of the campaign. The West Australian ran a satirical cartoon of soldiers chasing birds with slingshots, while the Sydney Morning Herald questioned the allocation of military funds to such a trivial pursuit. Critics argued the government had prioritized optics over practical solutions. Environmentalists, though few at the time, warned that culling would only displace the problem. Their concerns were validated when the emus migrated westward, ravaging crops in newly settled areas. By early 1933, the military withdrew, leaving behind a legacy of frustration and futility. The political fallout was swift. Parliament debated the operation's efficacy, with opposition leader John Curtin calling it a farce that wasted taxpayer money while ignoring the plight of struggling families. The government shifted strategy, offering bounties for emu hides and redirecting efforts toward habitat modification. Yet the birds persisted, their numbers rebounding by the 1940s. Today, ecologists recognize the emus as a natural adaptation to Australia's unpredictable climate. Their migration patterns, once seen as vandalism, are understood as survival instincts honed over millennia. The Emu War's cultural imprint deepened in the decades after. In the 1970s, filmmakers captured the event in documentaries, juxtaposing grainy footage of soldiers with the emu's unyielding presence. The 1998 publication by James Shelley reframed the conflict as a symbol of humanity's hubris, arguing that the birds represented the untamable spirit of the Australian frontier. His work sparked renewed interest, inspiring both academic studies and popular media. However, the tale's comedic reputation grew, overshadowing its darker undertones. The 2007 statue, while intended to honor the military's attempt, became a lightning rod for debates about colonial attitudes toward wildlife. Modern reenactments on platforms like YouTube often reduce the war to slapstick humor, but historians emphasize its broader implications. The conflict exposed tensions between agricultural expansion and ecological balance, a theme that resonates in today's climate discussions. In Quedag, locals still recount stories of emus outmaneuvering soldiers, their resilience a source of both pride and bewilderment. The National Museum of Australia in Canberra houses artifacts from the war: a rusted Lewis gun, a weathered map of the wheat belt, and a taxidermied emu specimen labeled Enemy Combatant No. 1. The emus themselves became inadvertent celebrities. Wildlife experts note that their population has stabilized, thanks to protected status and habitat conservation. Yet their image remains paradoxical. Revered as national icons, they are also reminders of a misguided chapter in Australia's history. As guide Marcus Feathers explains at the National Farming Museum, These birds taught us that respect, not domination, is the key to coexistence. His words echo the pragmatism of Prime Minister James Scullin, who, in 1933, acknowledged the futility of the war. We fought a battle we could not win, and in doing so, learned the value of patience. The Emu War's legacy endures in unexpected ways. Ecologists studying invasive species often cite it as a cautionary tale, while military historians analyze its tactical failures. The conflict's absurdity has become a metaphor for bureaucratic missteps, yet its core lessons remain urgent. In an age of climate uncertainty, the emu's adaptability offers insights into sustainable coexistence. Their story, etched into Australia's landscape, reminds us that some battles are best left unchosen. As the bronze statue stands watch over Beasley, it whispers a silent truth. The emus never truly lost. They simply refused to fight on human terms. The military's response to the emu invasion was mounted with the precision of a seasoned war effort, though their targets were avian and the terrain unpredictably hostile. By late October 1932, a column of over 1,500 soldiers from the Australian National Army had assembled in the Wheatbelt region, equipped with Lewis machine guns, artillery, and a level of discipline typically reserved for conventional warfare. General Sir William M. Mechan, a retired officer pressed into service for this peculiar campaign, ordered a systematic cordon and search operation across 30,000 square kilometers. Maps drawn in war rooms across Canberra illustrated the emu's range, annotated with grim notes about their movements. One such map, now in the National Archives of Australia, shows concentric circles around key farming districts, each marked with the number of emu sightings reported that week. The military strategy was clear: encircle the birds, drive them into shot range, and eliminate them swiftly. But the wheat waves, though seemingly obstacle-free, proved deceptive. The first major clash occurred near the property of farmer Charles Scadan, a man who would later be immortalized in local folklore as emu's worst enemy. His fields, dotted with makeshift wooden barriers, became a staging ground for the military's advance. As dawn broke, soldiers in khaki uniforms and helmets marched in tight formation, bayonets glinting. The emus, however, did not panic. They waited. Nestled in the dense yarra trees at the field's edge, the birds emerged one by one, their dark plumage blending with the shadowy branches. When the first shots rang out from the soldiers' Lewis guns, the emus scattered like smoke. Not wounded, but enraged. They pressed forward, not retreating to the safety of the bush, but charging into the open, their powerful legs crushing whatever stood in their path. A tape recording made at the time by a soldier describes the chaos. They're not running, they're fighting. It's like they've got a mind of their own. The military's confusion deepened as they realized the emus were not fleeing but actively avoiding capture. In a series of documented accountings, officers noted how the birds would halt mid-charge, then pivot sharply, guiding the soldiers into traps of their own making. One unit reported finding emus had dug shallow trenches to hide from gunfire, while another observed them luring troops into sticky patches of clay that slowed their advance. The emu's behavior defied conventional military logic. They did not fight as animals should. They moved with purpose, as if they understood the stakes. This realization haunted the ranks. Rumors spread of intelligent emus, a phrase that would later become a dark joke in military circles. The turning point came on November 2nd, when a prolonged skirmish near Mariamtimer Creek ended in abject failure. A platoon of 30 soldiers, armed with rifles and mortars, had been sent to flush a known emu nesting ground. What followed was a sequence of events that would be replayed in documentaries for decades. As the soldiers advanced, they fired volleys into the scrub, but the emus regrouped in a dense thicket, their calls a cacophony of defiance. When the mortars were deployed, they missed their targets, their projectiles bouncing harmlessly off rocks. By nightfall, the ploy had backfired. The soldiers, now out of position, were hunted by emus that seemed to sense their vulnerability. Several soldiers were wounded, not by gunfire but by the sheer terror their presence inspired. One chronicler wrote, "They were not monsters, they were calculating. It was as if they had learned from our mistakes." The media coverage of the war was both sensational and cynical. Newspapers global reports of battle scenes where emus outmaneuvered soldiers like gladiatorial beasts. A photograph taken by a local journalist, now in the Powerhouse Museum in Sydney, captures an emu standing atop a soldier's helmet, its neck extended in a posture of mock triumph. The image became an enduring symbol of the conflict's absurdity, though it masks the real tragedy of human overreach. The soldiers, led by a mix of veteran officers and inexperienced conscripts, began to question their orders. Some refused to fire, fearing they might endanger lives unnecessarily. Others, like Private John O'Brien, later wrote in a journal, "We were fighting birds, not soldiers, not a war, just a farce played out in the heat of a drought." The political fallout was swift. By December, Prime Minister Scullin had publicly acknowledged the futility of the campaign, a move that stunned both allies and critics. In a press conference held in Melbourne, he stated, "We pursued this operation with the gravity of a national emergency, only to find ourselves outmaneuvered by creatures that had no loyalty to any side." The admission was unprecedented. No Australian government had ever openly conceded failure in a military action. Scullin's words, however, were not without irony. They echoed the very sentiment that had driven the original decision. The emus had become an unintended lesson in ecological imbalance, their migration patterns exacerbated by the drought that had left crops depopulated. What followed was a shift in strategy. Instead of bullets, the government turned to non-lethal methods. A program funded by the Department of Agriculture began relocating emus to protected reserves, a process that involved trains and horse-drawn carts. The military, now reduced to a support role, provided logistical aid but did not fire a single shot in the final phase. This decision, while effective in preserving the emu population, was met with public skepticism. Many questioned why the army had been ordered to kill animals in the first place. A petition signed by 10,000 citizens demanded the immediate halt of the campaign, and while it did not alter the outcome, it highlighted a growing awareness of the need for coexistence. The emu's survival is a testament to both their adaptability and the inability of human systems to account for natural complexity. Ornithologists note that the emu population today numbers around 700,000, a fraction of its pre-war numbers but still a symbol of resilience. Their success is tied to the removal of predators like dingoes and foxes, as well as the absence of large-scale culling. However, the wheatbelt's agricultural demands remain a point of tension. As Dr. Helena Carter, an ecologist from the University of Western Australia, explains in a 2021 interview, the emu war was not just about birds. It was about how we manage our relationship with the land. We treated them as a problem to solve, not a species to coexist with. The legacy of the Great Emu War extends beyond ecology or military failure. It is a story of human hubris, a reminder that even the most rational minds can misjudge the value of something as simple as a bird. The bronze statue in Beasley, which once stood as a testament to the emu's victory, was later moved to the National Farming Museum, where it now sits beside a plaque reading, "In memory of the soldiers who learned that sometimes the enemy does not come in uniform." Yet the statue's presence is bittersweet. It celebrates a quirk of history but does little to address the broader question, why did we fight them at all? Modern historians often compare the Emu War to other instances of military overreach, such as the U.S. invasion of Panama in 1989 or the Soviet Union's ill-fated campaign in Afghanistan. In each case, the mistake was not in the absence of force, but in the failure to understand the nature of the adversary. The emus, for all their lack of malice, forced a confrontation that was neither necessary nor winnable. This parallel is not lost on analysts of modern warfare, who argue that the principles of the Emu War, misjudging the enemy, overestimating technological superiority, and ignoring ecological factors, are as relevant today as they were in 1932. In one final act of defiance, the emus left a physical mark on the landscape. In the wheat belt, certain areas still bear the scars of their battles: clay-packed trenches, broken fences, and the occasional half-buried Lewis gun. A local farmer, Mr. Scaddan's great-grandson, tells visitors to his farm that the emus never truly left. "They just changed their tactics," he says, gesturing to a patch of land where emus are occasionally seen. "They learned to avoid the guns, to find new places to nest. It's not that they won, it's that we stopped looking." This perspective, however humble, aligns with the broader truth of the Emu War. It was never about victory or defeat in a traditional sense. It was about the collision of two worlds, human ambition and natural instinct, each refusing to yield. The soldiers returned home with stories that would be told for generations, but the emus returned to their role as silent survivors, their presence a whisper against the wind. As the camera pans over the Australian outback, the sound of a lone emu call echoes, a sound that has come to symbolize more than just a bird's call. It is a reminder that some battles are not meant to be fought, that some wars are fought not with weapons, but with the willingness to listen. The Emu War, though bizarre in its premise, was not an isolated episode of military misadventure, but a microcosm of the broader tensions between human ambition and the unpredictability of nature. The conflict, which unfolded in 1932, was rooted in a specific crisis, a surge in emu populations that had devastated wheat crops across Western Australia's wheatbelt region. By 1932, these flightless birds, native to the continent, had multiplied to an estimated 20,000 in the area, their rapid reproduction and lack of natural predators making them a formidable agricultural threat. The local government, desperate to protect harvests, requested military intervention. What followed was a clash between organized force and wild instinct, one that exposed the limits of human control over ecosystems. The Australian military, unprepared for such an opponent, initially deployed a detachment of 1,500 soldiers from the 2nd Australian Infantry Brigade. Led by Brigadier William Scurry, the force was equipped with standard-issue Lewis guns, issued with orders to eliminate the threat. The soldiers, many of whom had fought in World War I, approached the situation with a familiar sense of duty, but little understanding of the emu's behavior. Unlike traditional warfare, where enemies are defined by language, culture, or ideology, the emus were a species driven by survival. They could outrun bullets, scatter in chaotic flocks, and retreat into dense scrubland, making conventional tactics ineffective. The first major engagement occurred near the town of Ipotent, where soldiers found themselves outmaneuvered by a swarm of emus that had seemingly anticipated their arrival. The birds, likely drawn by the scent of gunpowder or the disturbance of the soil, launched a violent assault. Soldiers reported being surrounded by hundreds of emus, their sharp beaks pecking at legs and weapons. The chaos left several troops wounded and others fleeing for cover. This incident, though not widely documented in official records, became a turning point. It revealed the sheer density and adaptability of the emu population, forcing the military to reconsider its approach. A key figure in the conflict was Major John G. Jack Truscott, a local officer who coordinated efforts between the military and civilian authorities. Truscott, a former artillery officer, recognized early on that the emus were not a conventional enemy. He began to experiment with unconventional methods, including the use of dogs to herd the birds and the deployment of aircraft to bomb flocks from above. The aircraft, however, proved no more effective than the ground troops. Emus, with their ability to fly short distances and their tendency to scatter in groups, made aerial bombardment a gamble. One instance saw a plane drop bombs on a flock, only for the birds to disperse and regroup within minutes. The failure of these strategies highlighted a critical oversight. The military had assumed the emus would behave like conventional enemies, but their instincts defied human logic. The soldiers, despite their training, were often outwitted. In one notable case, a group of emus ambushed a patrol near a water source, forcing the troops to surrender their weapons and flee. The emus, undeterred, continued to migrate across the wheat belt, their movements appearing almost deliberate. This led some soldiers to speculate that the birds had developed a primitive form of collective intelligence, though such theories were never substantiated. The war's toll on the military was relatively low, with only a handful of injuries reported. However, the psychological impact on the troops was significant. Many reported feelings of frustration and absurdity, as they firing at birds that showed no signs of malice. One soldier, Private Thomas Gallen, later recalled in a private journal, "It wasn't like fighting men. These things didn't hate us. They just didn't understand what we were doing." This perspective, though personal, underscores the dissonance between human intent and natural behavior. The government's response to the conflict was marked by a mix of pragmatism and embarrassment. Initially, the military presence was seen as a necessary measure, but as the emus proved resistant to eradication, officials began to question the allocation of resources. By mid-1932, the operation was scaled back, with the military withdrawing its forces and returning to routine duties. The final phase of the war saw a shift in strategy. Instead of trying to eliminate the emus, authorities focused on deterring them through fencing and culling. A total of over 5,000 emus were killed during the campaign, but the population quickly rebounded, underscoring the futility of such efforts. The aftermath of the Emu War had lingering effects on Australia's approach to wildlife management. The incident became a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating natural forces. In the years following the conflict, the government invested more in scientific research on emu populations, leading to the establishment of wildlife reserves and breeding programs aimed at controlling their numbers. The war also influenced military doctrine, with lessons learned about the limitations of technological superiority in non-traditional conflicts. Beyond its military implications, the Emu War left a cultural imprint on Australian society. It became a subject of folklore, with stories of the Emu Uprising passed down through generations. Local museums in the Wheatbelt region display remnants of the conflict, including damaged weapons, shattered fences, and photographs of soldiers in the field. One such photograph, taken in 1932, shows a group of soldiers standing atop a hill, their rifles raised, as a vast flock of emus descends upon them. The image, now faded but haunting, captures the surreal nature of the event. The mythos of the Emu War also found its way into Australian art and literature. Poets and writers of the 20th century often referenced the conflict as a metaphor for the clash between human progress and primal nature. One such work, a short story by author John B. Mackin, titled The Birds That Would Not Die, depicted the emus as symbols of resilience, their survival a testament to the unpredictability of ecosystems. While not widely read, such works contributed to the war's legacy as a cultural touchstone. In terms of historical accuracy, the Emu War is often dismissed as a footnote in military history, but its significance lies in its ability to encapsulate a broader truth about human conflict. Unlike wars fought with clear objectives and identifiable enemies, the Emu War was a battle against an enemy that was neither malicious nor strategic. It was a collision of human ambition and natural survival, a reminder that not all adversaries can be reduced to statistical models or military strategy. The physical scars of the conflict remain in the Wheatbelt region. In areas like the Little Barrier Range, farmers still report finding old Lewis gun ammunition and broken fences. These objects, now relics of a bygone era, serve as tangible reminders of the war's scale. A local historian, Dr. Eleanor McSeed, who has studied the region, notes that these artifacts tell a story of human folly and natural persistence. She emphasizes that the Emu War was not just about numbers or weapons, but about the human tendency to seek control in environments where none exists. The soldiers who participated in the Emu War often described it as a bizarre but formative experience. For many, it was their first encounter with a conflict that defied their understanding of warfare. Some, like Captain Reginald H. Reg Voss, wrote letters home describing the operation as the most absurd thing I've ever been a part of. Yet others took pride in their efforts, believing they had done everything possible to protect the region. Voss, who later served in World War II, credited the Emu War with teaching him adaptability, a skill he would later apply in combat. The government's eventual retreat from the conflict was not without controversy. Some critics argued that the military had been used as a pawn in a political scheme, with the initial request for intervention driven more by public pressure than military necessity. Others contended that the operation was a necessary, if misguided, response to a genuine threat. This debate continues to this day, with some viewing the Emu War as a tragic example of short-sighted policy, while others see it as a pragmatic attempt to solve a local problem. The Emu War's legacy is also tied to its symbolic value. In a world increasingly dominated by high-tech warfare, the conflict serves as a reminder of the limitations of technology when faced with nature's complexity. The emus, with their simple biology and instinctual behavior, outmaneuvered human strategies, much like how cyber threats or biological pandemics can defy traditional defenses. This parallel has led some modern analysts to draw comparisons between the Emu War and contemporary challenges, such as the use of drones in conflicts where adversaries operate beyond conventional warfare. In the decades following the war, the emu population in Western Australia fluctuated, but their presence never truly disappeared. Today, they are a common sight in the region, their numbers managed through a combination of conservation efforts and controlled culling. The Watson family, descendants of early settlers in the area, have embraced this coexistence. Mr. Watson, a farmer who once lived near the battlefields, tells visitors that the emus are a part of the land's character. "They're not enemies," he says. "They're just there. We have to live with them, like we do with the snakes or the kangaroos." The cultural resonance of the Emu War extends beyond Australia. In international media, it has been cited as an example of how absurdity can arise from human error. Documentaries and historical analyses often reference it as a cautionary tale about the risks of overconfidence in military solutions. Japanese academic Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, who has written extensively on unconventional conflicts, notes that the Emu War is a testament to the fact that not all threats can be quantified or controlled. Sometimes, the enemy is not a nation or a weapon, but a force of nature. The final scenes of the Emu War, as captured in archival footage, are some of the most telling. A 1932 newsreel shows a group of soldiers standing in a dusty field, their weapons empty, as emus scatter in all directions. The footage, grainy and dated, conveys a sense of futility. Yet it also captures a moment of quiet acceptance. The soldiers, disarmed and exhausted, seem to understand that the war was never meant to be won. The emus, for all their destructive potential, were not driven by malice. They were simply surviving. This realization, though tinged with irony, is at the heart of the Emu War's significance. It challenges the notion that all conflicts require a clear victory or defeat. In some cases, the goal is not to eradicate but to coexist. The emus, in their persistence, forced humans to confront the limits of their control. Their call, echoing through the Australian outback, has come to symbolize this truth. It is not a sound of triumph or defeat, but of a world where nature and human ambition collide in ways that neither can fully dominate. As the camera pulls back from the empty fields of the wheat belt, the sound of an emu call lingers in the air. It is a sound that has been interpreted in many ways over the years. Some see it as a reminder of human failure, others as a testament to nature's resilience. What is certain is that the Emu War remains one of the most unusual and enduring stories in military history. It is a story that does not fit neatly into categories of war, victory, or defeat. Instead, it exists in the space between, a testament to the unpredictable nature of both conflict and the natural world. The soldiers who fought in the Emu War may have returned home with stories of insignificance, but their experiences left an indelible mark on the fabric of Australian military culture. The war is often remembered as a footnote, but its lessons remain relevant. It underscores the importance of adaptability, the dangers of overreach, and the need to understand the enemy, not just in terms of strategy, but in terms of intent and nature. In the broader context of history, the Emu War is a microcosm of the larger theme of human interaction with the environment. It reflects the 20th century's struggle to balance technological advancement with ecological awareness. While the war itself was a minor event, its implications are far-reaching. It reminds us that some battles are not fought with weapons, but with the humility to recognize when force is unnecessary. The Emu War's legacy is also tied to its place in collective memory. While most Australians may not recall the specifics of the conflict, it is a story that lingers in the subconscious. It is the kind of tale that is passed down in community gatherings, mentioned in casual conversation, or referenced in modern media. Its absurdity makes it memorable, a story that resists being forgotten. In the end, the Emu War was not about machines or men, but about the collision of two worlds. It was a war waged not with hatred, but with necessity. The soldiers, though outmatched, did not fail in a traditional sense. They simply could not overcome an enemy that did not need to be defeated. The emus, in their silent persistence, taught a lesson that transcends time, that some conflicts are not meant to be won, but to be understood. As the documentary closes, the camera lingers on the vast, open landscape of Western Australia. The sound of an emu call fades into the background, replaced by the soft rustle of the wind. This is a land that has seen much: wars, droughts, and the passage of time. Yet it is also a land that continues to hold secrets, both hidden and revealed. The Emu War is one of those secrets, a story that may never be fully told, but that continues to echo in the hearts of those who remember it. The final shot is of a lone emu walking across a field, its head held high. It is a simple image, yet it carries the weight of the conflict. The emu does not look back. It does not fear. It simply moves on. This, perhaps, is the truest lesson of the Emu War, that some battles are not about dominance, but about acceptance. That some wars are not fought with guns, but with the willingness to let go. And so, the documentary ends not with a grand conclusion, but with the quiet resilience of a bird that refused to be conquered. The Emu War may have been a minor event, but its impact is vast. It is a reminder that history is not just about the grand narratives of power and conquest, but about the small, unexpected moments that shape our understanding of the world. In the end, the emu's call remains, not as a sound of defeat, but as a call to listen.